Welcome to the Lion's Share podcast, where we break down today's most impactful research and bring fresh insights from the academic frontier straight to you.
Now, for those of us in B2B marketing, trust is everything. It's the bedrock. But today, we're tackling something a bit counterintuitive. What if that very trust, the thing we work so hard to build, actually becomes a liability?
It's a paradox, isn't it? We're diving into a 2022 conceptual paper by Forkmann and colleagues. It's called Boundary Spanner Corruption, a potential dark side of multi-level trust in marketing relationships.
Right. And our mission here is to really get under the hood, not just defining corruption, but understanding how the very systems we build for good relationships might inadvertently pave the way for it.
Yeah, exactly. And this isn't just about, one person skimming off the top. The paper defines boundary spanner corruption, BSC, very clearly. It's voluntary collaborative behavior between individuals representing different organizations that violates their organization's norms.
Collaboration being the key word there. So it takes two, a buyer and a seller rep, working together against their company's interests.
Precisely. And look, the scale is staggering. The World Bank reckons bribery alone is maybe 2% of global GDP annually.
2%. That's enormous.
It is. So we're dealing with something widespread, serious, and often hidden within what look like perfectly healthy B2B partnerships.
Okay, let's unpack that. So for BSC to really take root, it's not just about bad apples. It needs a specific environment, right?
Yeah.
The paper argues this comes from trust operating at different levels.
That's the core of their framework. It's the interplay, the combination of trust at 3 levels that kind of opens the door. First up, you've got interpersonal trust. That's the bond between the two people, the salesperson, the buyer. The rapport, the liking, the feeling, I can rely on this person.
Makes sense. That's where relationships start.
Then level 2, intraorganizational agency trust. This is internal. It's management back at headquarters trusting their own rep, their boundary spanner, to do the right thing for the company.
Okay. That sounds crucial for, how much freedom or oversight that rep gets.
Exactly. High agency trust often means less checking, more autonomy. And the third level is interorganizational trust. That's the trust between the two companies as entities, the overall relationship health.
So 3 levels: personal, internal management trust, and company-to-company trust.
And the paper's real insight is connecting these. High interpersonal trust makes the initial collusion easier, obviously. High interorganizational trust means maybe less overall suspicion between the firms. But the linchpin, often, is that high interorganizational agency trust. When a manager really trusts their salesperson, they might ease up on the controls. They create, maybe without realizing it, managerial laxity.
So it's not just a personal failing then. It's a structural vulnerability that emerges when the relationship is actually successful, especially if success means management kind of takes their eye off the ball.
That's it. And this builds on earlier work like Fang et al.'s research, but it pushes it further. It suggests the dark side isn't just a choice someone makes in isolation. It's dynamic. It emerges from the structure.
So trust isn't just lowering transaction costs. It's potentially lowering the motivation and the ability to monitor effectively.
Exactly, which is precisely what you need for corruption to flourish undetected.
Which brings us neatly to this core idea in the paper, the boundary-spanning social cocoon. I mean, the name itself, cocoon. It sounds insulating, maybe even cozy.
It does, doesn't it? But it's the breeding ground for this deviation. It's this microculture that the two boundary spanners build together.
How does it form? What are the mechanics?
They talk about a process called encapsulation. Basically, the reps become more and more insulated from their own company's rules and oversight. There are 3 types. First, social encapsulation. Think blurring lines, lots of non-business stuff, gifts, meals, maybe intense social media connection. It builds that joint love for each other, as one informant put it, solidarity.
Okay, so getting too close personally, what's the second?
Physical encapsulation. This is about space and time. The reps spend loads of time out of their own office, maybe working from the customer site, traveling together. They're physically distant from their own company culture.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind, perhaps.
Yeah.
Less reinforcement of the home firm's norms.
And the third one, which you flagged earlier as potentially the most dangerous, is ideological encapsulation.
This is where they start thinking alike, developing their own shared goals or ways of doing things.
Exactly. They create their own rules of the game for their partnership, which might start to drift, subtly at first, from official company policy and governance. They see themselves as a unit, maybe operating outside the normal procedures.
And you can see how that creates huge compliance headaches. The paper mentions things like moving conversations to WhatsApp, right? Off the official record.
Absolutely. One informant said it becomes extremely hard to get access to that data. It shields their interactions from audits, from oversight. It's a deliberate move into the shadows.
Okay, so the cocoon creates the safe space. But how does the actual corruption, the specific bad acts, become, well, normal? How does it shift from a one-off thing to routine? What's that normalization of corrupt behavior process look like?
Well, the paper suggests it's a three-step psychological journey. First is socialization. This is your classic slippery slope.
Little things leading to bigger things.
Exactly. Incrementalism. Starts with a small favor, maybe bending a rule slightly, then a slightly bigger one. An unauthorized discount here, extending payment terms there. The line just keeps moving.
Until you're way over it without maybe even realizing how far you've gone.
Precisely. The second step is rationalization. This is where moral disengagement kicks in. People find ways to justify what they're doing. They reframe it. It's not really a bribe. It's just an asset for relationship building. Or we need to do this to make the business work. Or I'm protecting my partner. They square it with their conscience, however tenuously.
But hang on, if they're rationalizing it as good for business or helping the relationship, isn't that blurring the lines? How do you tell the difference between legitimate, creative problem solving, which high trust should allow, and this kind of self-serving rationalization?
That is the million-dollar question for managers, isn't it? It comes down to whose interests are really being served long-term. Is it the firm's goals based on norms and ethics, or is it the dyad's goals operating in their cocoon? And when it hits the third step, institutionalization, the game is really lost for the firms.
That's when it becomes baked into the process.
Yeah. It's embedded, it's routine. The paper has that great little anecdote about the manager who always won the lucky draw at supplier events.
Right. It's just expected, unquestioned. That's when it's truly systemic.
And the whole thing gets accelerated if you have deviance-inducing factors present.
Like what pushes people into this?
Things like crazy high sales quotas, putting immense pressure on reps. Or maybe an individual's personality, like a high propensity for risk-taking. Even perceived unfairness, feeling underpaid or undervalued, can act as a trigger. These things ignite the spark in the fertile ground that trust has created.
And the consequences, they can be catastrophic, right?
Right.
Not just the immediate cost of, say, overpaying for something.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the immediate costs, yes. Then the opportunity costs, what better deal did you miss out on? But the really scary part is the latent financial risk, the stuff lurking beneath the surface.
Like the GlaxoSmithKline example in China. That blew up spectacularly.
Didn't it just? Massive fines, reputation shredded. Now, what was it, an 18% drop in sales the next year? That's latent risk becoming very, very real.
Which leads us straight into the managerial headache. If high agency trust management, trusting their rep is a key enabler because it leads to less oversight.
Then you get managers relying heavily on outcome-based controls. I trust Sarah. She always hits her numbers. I don't need to look too closely at how she does it.
But wait, isn't that a classic sales management approach? Focus on the results, the outcomes. High targets, big commissions.
It is common, yes. But the paper argues it's incredibly risky in this context. If you only focus on outcomes, especially with punishingly high quotas, you might actually be creating the pressure that drives reps into that corrupt cocoon just to hit the numbers. You're ignoring the how.
So outcome controls can backfire? They might even incentivize the very behavior you want to stop.
They can. The argument is that managers need to shift towards more effective behavior-based controls, monitoring the process, not just the result.
Okay, but how? How do you implement behavior controls without, crushing the autonomy that good salespeople need? You can't really micromanage relationship building.
It's a balancing act, for sure. But it means being strategic, targeting the encapsulation mechanisms directly. For instance, mandatory staff rotation, say every 2 or 3 years. That disrupts the deep interpersonal trust and prevents the cocoon from getting too established.
Okay, breaks up the dyad. What else?
Or simple things, like mandatory office Fridays, forcing reps to reconnect with the home base, reinforcing internal norms, countering that physical and social separation. It's about monitoring the process, the interactions, not just the final sales figures.
Right. And crucially, the paper says doing this alone, just one company tightening up, doesn't really work.
That's a key insight. Unilateral controls are leaky. If the seller tightens up but the buyer is still lax, the corrupt dyad can just shift their shady dealings to exploit the weaker side.
So because the problem is dyadic involving two parties, the solution has to be dyadic too.
Exactly. You need a coordinated, inter-firm approach. Both companies need to agree on joint controls, things like shared audit protocols, clear, mutually enforced rules on gifts or communication channels. You have to close the gaps together.
It makes sense. Collaboration on controls to fight collaborative corruption. Now, thinking about future research for our DBA and PhD listeners, studying this stuff empirically is tough, right? It's hidden by nature. You can't just survey people, "Excuse me, are you corrupt?"
No, not quite. Direct questions are obviously useless. So the authors propose an indirect route, developing what they call a cocoon likelihood index.
Okay, what's that? Measuring the risk rather than the act itself.
Precisely. Instead of asking about corruption, you measure the observable behaviors and conditions that enable the cocoon. Things like how much time reps spend on informal versus official channels, frequency of off-site meetings, maybe even asking how confident they are that their counterpart has their back. These things individually seem harmless.
So reps might report them more honestly.
That's the idea. They're less likely to see reporting frequency of lunches as self-incriminating compared to admitting bribery. You build a formative index from these risk factors to gauge the structural vulnerability.
Interesting. A way to quantify the preconditions.
Yeah, it allows for rigorous study of the antecedents. And related to that, there's another big theoretical question they raise about intraorganizational agency trust.
A trust from management.
Right. They speculate it might have an inverted U-shaped effect.
Meaning, trust is good up to a point, but then too much trust becomes bad.
Exactly. Initially, more trust fuels autonomy, performance, it's all good. But past a certain inflection point, management gets too comfortable, monitoring drops off too much, and the risk of corruption actually increases.
Finding that tipping point where trust turns toxic, that sounds like a major challenge for research.
It really is. That's where practitioner scholars can make a huge contribution. You'd need sophisticated methods, maybe longitudinal studies, latent variable modeling, clever experiments, using archival data perhaps to try and pinpoint that threshold. When does useful trust become dangerous complacency?
That's fascinating. Okay, so wrapping this up, the big takeaway seems to be this real duality of trust. The very same multi-level trust that makes B2B relationships work efficiently also creates the perfect conditions for the social cocoon and, potentially, corruption.
Absolutely. The mechanisms for value creation are also the mechanisms for value destruction, potentially. The answer isn't no trust. It's balanced trust balanced with smart, vigilant, and importantly, coordinated controls focused on behavior.
And maybe thinking beyond the huge scandals.
Yes. I think the real danger often isn't the massive front-page bribery case. It's the everyday, small, garden-variety corruption, as the paper might imply. The stuff that gets rationalized away, normalized within these trusted diets, and becomes institutionalized. That slow creep, that acceptance, even if it seems to help hit targets in the short term, that's what can silently rot a firm's financial health and its reputation from the inside out.
A sobering thought. So what does this all mean for you? Well, the next time you're looking at a B2B strategy, or maybe assessing your star relationship manager, just remember that deep well of trust, your biggest asset. It could also be harboring your biggest hidden risk.
Thanks for tuning into the Lion's Share podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share it with a friend, and join us next time for more ideas worth talking about. We'll see you next time.